tools that you're using in your job right now that have been game changers? Or maybe you're in one of those places where it's kind of shunned or, looked frowned upon to use those tools. And we'd love to hear about that too. Like, what's your perspective on that? So, I know for me, it's kind of a boring one, but it is truthfully something I'm using all the time, which is Gemini or ChatGPT. Um, and I'm the director of IT, and my most common use cases are to summarize, or to adjust my tone when I'm sending a message. I use that a lot actually, depending on the audience. If I'm not comfortable writing to that audience, those are my two probably most common use cases, outside of just research. Like doing really fast research, or oftentimes even just replacing the need to do a Google search. I've started just kind of in some cases just starting with these large language models. So I'm curious if you guys are using tools in your profession, your occupation, or if you're being discouraged from using them.
Logan, how about you up at Trinity?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're slow moving, but we're looking to adopt AI with, I believe, Copilot at some point. Um, I don't know. We have enterprise chat GPT, use that to review emails before sending them off. Personally, in my work, I don't use it as much, but I know that a lot of other colleagues definitely use AI a lot.
What's your role there, Logan?
I'm a project coordinator.
Oh, nice. Okay, nice.
Weijin, how about yourself? How do you use it?
Um, I most use it to generate ideas. Okay, and also when I'm writing something, and sometimes I need to paraphrase, like sometimes code something and not direct code, and some ideas from research papers, and I will paraphrase it. But most of the time, yeah, we generate some ideas, ask questions, give us some kind of uh, yeah, some framework. And also our school is really embrace AI wholeheartedly, and we have a bot, Copilot, and also we have a series of lectures teaching faculty how to use Copilot, to teach. Yeah.
Oh, do you feel like that's been effective?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really effective, especially, and also I found that generative AI is really powerful. I'm learning some SQL, some data analysis right now, and sometimes I'm kind of stuck in code, and I just ask questions, and they give me the code and run it in the software, and it worked. It's really helped me a lot. Sometimes I cannot find the help, but AI, yes, ChatGPT can help me, okay, solve the problem instantly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny with coding specifically. When ChatGPT was first announced, that was the first thing that popped in my head as I don't do coding anymore, but as a back-end developer for some years. And so I was like, oh wow, I wonder if that would have been nice to have. And I tried it, and this was just more of the consumer grade products that were out there. And it wasn't that great, coming from a coder's perspective. But I've revisited it in the recent months, and even just the free public use models they've improved drastically around coding. So
Mm.
it's very interesting. It's very different though. It's continued to evolve quite a bit from my original attempts to use it to evaluate code. So that's encouraging.
Uh, Ethan, you're a coding expert. You're a data scientist.
Something like
Um,
that.
yeah, man. What do you think?
Hey, my name's Ethan. I'm the director of analytics here at Nectar. We provide AI assistance to higher education, including LAPU, and y'all been like awesome to work with for about a year now. Also, a former high school teacher, taught math and stat a long time ago. I use AI all over my work. I use our product Nectar. I use GPT 4.0. I use GPT oh 01 was the preview, now the current. They released a new version a couple weeks ago. I also use Claude and Gemini. Um, I have opinions on all of them. What I use them for, they kind of stretch me in different directions, right? Like I have this, skill set that I feel really comfortable with, but I might know less about these other periphery topics, and they just kind of boost me up in all of these things. So in my world, like I do data, but sometimes I write like application code, and they help me with that. I do data, but sometimes I like email something important, they help me with that. Um, my kind of like most common use case is probably when I need to solve a problem and I can go search the internet for 10 minutes and find my solution. But I can just in, a minute or 2 minutes, get like functioning code that works. You mentioned SQL. Uh, AI is awesome at SQL. SQL is a super pretty simple semantic language, super awesome at SQL. Um, so I'll like write, many of my queries with AI just because I want to type out like 200 characters. I can just type 40 and get a nice clean query. Um, Other use cases I want to explore are there's an IDE, an integrated development environment called Cursor, which people are loving. It's for writing your code. I haven't used that myself yet, but I would like to. And I came across a product called Phantom AI, which I've never used, but they provide AI note taking. And they're kind of leading the race on that. It appears they're a free service. They have a paid plan, but Phantom with an F, I'll toss in the chat. I've never used their product, but it looks really cool.
Cool.
Phantom AI.
Nice. Ethan, you mentioned you were a previous math teacher, math and stats. I'm curious if you would have had these tools back then, what would have it looked like from the teacher's perspective in empowering students to use it back then? And I ask this because I've found that if you don't know anything about a domain and you just start and then you utilize a large language model to try to get from 0 to 100, oftentimes you're steering the ship in the wrong direction and you end up in an obscure place, but you don't even know that you made it to the wrong place. Versus, I love how you said that you kind of have your core understanding of stuff, and then there's this periphery, there's these surrounding areas where you're like, well, I know a little bit, right? So when you're introducing somebody to a brand new topic, right, as a teacher, what are your thoughts, right? So because you're a previous teacher, so what would have been the challenge if your school would have maybe encouraged you to do that? Yeah.
That's a great question. Yeah, I taught Math 1 like algebra as well as AP Stat. Awesome time. I love my experience teaching, but I no longer do the course. Oh man, great question. Just kind of like ramble on this a bit. Yeah, right. These models are super intelligent. They're PhD level in all sorts of topics, but they don't know what you know, right? And so we talk about like AI literacy means a lot of things. I think the core skill for someone to have right now in December of 24 is to be able to like understand where they're at on a topic and then prompt the model to meet them where they're at, right? That kind of cycle. You can imagine for high school, it'd be like, I'm in AP Stat or I'm in Bio 101 or whatever. And then to kind of like give the model a bit of a nugget of context to circle back in to explain a topic at your level with the vernacular you might understand. I think if I was at a school when this technology was coming out and I felt this pressure from my faculty to deploy it, I feel like that'd be the support I'd want. I'd want to know that like the most important thing you can do is provide like a sentence or two with your prompt every single time, or use a tool that where that's kind of controlled for me, where someone can like define a system prompt and say, explain this at the high school or entry level, college level, etc. Maybe using these particular tone or words, etc., to kind of like funnel this massive, complex, huge thing into where I can understand. What's the ed theory, your zona proximal development for anyone in education out there? Where
ZPD.
yeah. That little, stretch yourself just enough, but not too much. Kind of controlling that, I would think.
Ooh, can I piggyback on that? Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that concept. So, what we've been diving into really deeply with our faculty lately is active learning. And learning's supposed to be difficult. There's that Vygotsky said zone of proximal development. That's where that came from. And then the Bjorks later came up with desired difficulty. So learning should have a level of difficulty, right? And the active learning piece, which is cool, is that when you engage with the content, the learning is the byproduct of that engagement and it sticks better. It creates durable learning and it sticks. And we've been diving in really deeply using Nectar, our Nectar assistants, to create that active learning within our asynchronous online environment. And I'm betting dollars to donuts that it's really going to work well because when we create that active environment, and that content sticks better, students are able to apply it to complex issues with a creative and critical mindset. So they're better at what they do. They can use it better than somebody who just gets it from a passive standpoint. So that's what I really love about the Nectar bots. And then one thing that I use all the time with uh, GPT outside of Nectar is we've written a lot of papers lately, and I'll put in a rubric and then put in the paper and say, hey, rate this to the rubric to see, okay, you know what, I need to shore this up before I put it in for publication or whatever to get that feedback. And it's been enlightening and it's been very helpful to do that. So active learning and then getting feedback I've been doing a little too much of that probably lately.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, welcome, Darren, Calista. You guys hopped on while we were talking. Um, Darren, if you don't mind sharing, we were just asking, well, if you don't mind sharing where you're from, what you do, but also, do you have any AI tools that you're actively using in your job that are actually helping, with your personal efficiency? And if you would mind sharing some of those things. And if not, and on the contrary, if it's discouraged by your current employer, sharing your opinions on maybe just your take on that as well.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, my name's Darren Mann. I am a project manager at Trinity Western University. I've just started here recently. One of the tools that I'm using right now for work is a tool called Fixer AI. And what it does is it allows me to, well, it takes notes, meeting minutes. That's kind of a simple thing. It takes meeting minutes, but what it does is it categorizes my emails. So when an email comes in that I need to respond to, it will let me know that's an important email that needs to be responded to, and it drafts a response to the sender. So that's one of the things that it does. And then it has different color categories where it categorizes the emails to say this red is important. If it's a marketing email, that'll get categorized into, I think it's like purple or something. So it has different color categories. So I can just look at my inbox and say, okay, that's important. I've got to deal with that. That's not important. That's marketing. So been using the tool now for probably about a month or so. I found out I'm actually an AI consultant as well. So I found out from another AI consultant, and she told me about it. So I use a lot of AI tools, but I like that one for work.
Cool. That's awesome. Actually, I have not personally used that one. So, but we can all use a little bit of help in our inbox because
For sure.
it's a mess. So, Callista is also with the LAPU team, but she's more on the creative side of things. So I'm curious, Callista, do you have some favorite tools, AI tools that you're using?
So I think Nectar is probably my favorite right now. Just building those active learning moments has been really exciting. And the SME I've been working with recently, like it started out with, okay, we'll try one of these like simulation style conversation bots. And now there's going to be 5 in her course. So she got bit by that bug real quick. And then in our last meeting, we had a guy here who recommended to me checking out Gamma for spinning up really beautiful slide decks from like bullet point notes. So I've started using that since last month's conversation, and it's amazing. It's really, really good. And then I always use Canva's AI features. I love Canva, and they keep expanding what their AI features can do, which is super cool. I could keep going, but those are probably my top 3.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually not used Gamma. I think that was the one George was telling me about a couple days ago. I was like, oh man, I wish I would have known that before my presentation.
Oh
Like,
yeah, no,
yeah,
it's super quick and beautiful.
yeah, that's cool. What about you, Mike? I'm not sure that we heard from you yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the use cases you guys have already said about, adjusting emails or tone. But I've been using, I actually just hired an individual and I used Notebook LM, which is Google's new notebook, to target just, and I could have used Nectar and I didn't even think about it because for us, Nectar is all about the course assistance at this point. We're working to expand that, but I put in the notebook my job description and all the candidates' resumes, and I had looked through them and I had feelings about them, but then I asked the notebook chat person to compare the resumes to the job description. And it did a phenomenal job of confirming and even giving me some ideas outside of the what I was seeing from the resumes themselves, like how some of their experience could have moved into the requirements or could have prepared them for the requirements for the position, which was pretty cool. But then we started recording our interviews, and so I took my thoughts and ideas of the interviews, and I took the transcripts of those interviews and put them in Notebook LLM and did the same thing, had it compare it to the job description, and it was really really cool to confirm because I was like, this could work. But I have some questions. Let me see. I just getting a second opinion. I had a panel that was with me that was doing some of that as well. But being able to just throw it into the notebook and have AI say, wow, based on this interview, this is where the strengths were, these were the weaknesses, and being able to just highlight that in like literally seconds was pretty phenomenal. And definitely would recommend doing that as long as you're doing it in a private, enclosed space that doesn't share or train the model itself. But super phenomenal experience just using it for a hiring process. But I use it for coding. I've developed a lot of Google App scripts to do things, and Gemini does a great job of like giving me mostly working code, and it is a lot faster than going and searching online through all the different sites trying to find somebody who had the same exact problem I had or the same goal I had. It can just find it and recommend it, and sometimes it takes you on a wild, goose hunt, but often not as long as searching through post after post after post and in different sites to figure out the code. So that's pretty
Cool.
helpful there.
Yeah, I know all of our contribution points in Stack Overflow have come to a halt because we're we're all going over to these large language models. It's interesting you said, or I'm sorry, Ethan, you were going to say something.
I was gonna ask, have you done the podcast feature in
Oh
Notebook
yeah.
LM yet?
I did
Amazing.
it. I did it with our employee handbook. It was kind of funny just to see what kind of highlights they would get out of that such a boring document and make it sound so engaging. It was really fun to do that.
In
Awesome.
our
Oh,
in
go
our
ahead.
MSIDT courses,
Yeah,
we created a podcast from the syllabus with
the
that,
syllabus.
and
Yeah.
it's rocking. Was that what you're going to bring up, Buzz?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I was like, it made it so much more fun to like go over the syllabus content. And I made the syllabus really pretty too, but it was still way more fun to hear like a podcast version of it.
Clever.
I love that, like when somebody's talking about AI, it can be industry agnostic, but like you'll hear a use case and immediately it unlocks something. So, Mike, as you were talking about utilizing Notebook LM to compare, a job description against multiple candidates, I'm thinking of, okay, for folks that are responsible for procurement or getting vendors to buy in, to purchase products from vendors, sometimes we'll do what's called a request for proposal. So you write up all the specs of what you're trying to achieve, and then you put it out there, and vendors will then provide proposals. And it's the same exact concept. You can take this kind of defined, this is what we want, and then here's what we're going to give you, and then compare them all. I've not tried that yet, but that's something that just came to mind. So that's pretty cool. Um, and I'm curious if you guys are willing to keep talking about utilizing AI in your work. Um, One of the areas that we're noticing is that you know, folks are utilizing AI, consumers are utilizing AI without even realizing it at this point because products and services are embedding it into their product or service. So for example, here at LAPU, we have a partnership with Nectar. And so we have a course assistant built into our it's in our digital classroom. And so when students go in there, it feels very comfortable for them to go in there and just start using this product. Or, if you're in like a Bank of America app, maybe you're using the Zelle, to send or receive money. Any good examples where you're utilizing AI and you didn't even realize it? So I'll give one right now because we take all of the for example, in our call center product that we use here at our university, there's an AI feature that will summarize a transcript. And for so long, we were actually taking notes about these conversations, even though this summary was actually present the whole time. We flipped a switch, and then all of a sudden, we didn't have to have people taking notes anymore because there's an AI feature already embedded in the product that we're using. So yeah, so I'm curious if there's like AI features within products that you're using that have been exciting. So maybe not a Gemini or a Chat GPT, but hey, I noticed when you're in Facebook, now when you're in Facebook, it gives you a suggestion and stuff like that. But any like native or kind of interesting uses of AI that you've seen in there, either in your consumer life or in your job?
I've got one that I just found out about yesterday. We have a YouTube channel that we manage for our team, and they just added a new tab right in the front of your studio where you can brainstorm using AI for ideas of what videos to create, and it'll tell you if your audience will be receptive to it based on who's subscribed to your channel. It's pretty cool.
Fascinating.
Mhm. And how about the flip side? Does anybody use software that does not have AI in it anymore?
That you wish did.
Yeah. Because I was trying to think, everything I use has something.
Our student information system. So this is probably common for a lot of us that are in higher education. A lot of those kind of antiquated, older products that maybe we bought 10 years ago, they've been a little bit slower to adopt or maybe to drive those features. And so I've noticed it in like the higher education specific software. Oftentimes that's where I'm seeing like, I wish they had it there. I wish they had it because I know that they could predict a class load size based off of the historical class load in certain sessions, and so many things, so many areas where I wish they had it around our student information system. So that's the first thing that came to mind.
Daniel, I have a question. You say you're using the Nectar as an AI assistant in the course in Canvas.
Mhm.
So what kind of difference from ChatGPT, whether students can just find the answer from ChatGPT instead of from your AI
Oh.
assistant with the different functions?
Let me give my 2 cents because I'm not the expert on this. So I'll give you the non-expert opinion real quick. And then I'll pass it over to George because he's literally written papers on this. So my take though is that when you're thinking about a university in a digital format, and especially an emerging technology like AI, you want to get it in the hands of your students as fast as possible because they're going to be expected to utilize that in their jobs. So you want to empower them, but there's this honest fear of, well, if we give them full access to this, could they just cheat their way through school? Right? Could they just cheat their way through school? And so we have to find a way to balance giving them that technology, but in a way that helps them grow, that doesn't stifle their growth. And so I'll stop there because that's, and I'll pass it over to George because that to me is the challenge that schools are presented with while actually encouraging students to use AI.
And I love that comment because the way you kind of put that, Daniel, because if you're in higher ed and you're not being proactive with AI, you're doing your students a disservice, period. That's my whole philosophy behind it. Because what we do with Nectar is we have control over how the assistant works. So the assistant doesn't just spit out information. The assistant engages in conversation. Like Ethan and I looked at the use records, and it looks like I want to say the average conversation back and forth was somewhere around 6 interactions. So we know that students are engaging on multiple interactions, back and forth interactions within each session with it. So we know the students are engaging with it to ask it questions, and it asks a question back. So it's Socratic in nature by the way it works. So we know that students are actually engaging in conversation and then reflection because Spark, our assistant, asks reflective type questions. Well, oh, that's great. I see your assignments on this. What do you know about this? Oh, I don't know much. Oh, okay. Well, there's several parts to this. How about this one part? What do you know about that? I imagine you have some experience in it. So it doesn't just, you don't just upload instructions and get a paper from it. So we took the perspective of teaching ethical use of the intelligence. And that's why we are so psyched about it, because we know that it helps with learning as opposed to just the GPA. It has a big effect on the GPA, but that's because students are learning more, not because they're being given the content. And in there, we actually have Mike and Ryan actually wrote the prompts where it says, I forget it's banned or thou shalt not give write papers for students, things like that. So it's pretty impressive the way it works. So when you use it ethically and teach it ethically, students use it ethically. But if you hide it, they're going to cheat with something outside of the school, 100%.
I think
Yeah.
And
part of the question you asked that's interesting to me is, you know, what would make them want to use Spark rather
Mhm.
than Chat GPT? And so one of the things we've been trying to do is communicate to students like this AI tool is trained on every little piece of content in your course. So if you have a question
Mhm.
about anything in this course, this tool can answer your question. If they were to go to Chat GPT, they could get any number of answers that would not be specific to their course content. So we've taken that approach to make them feel like there's a 24/7 expert available to them
Mhm.
to answer their specific questions about their specific assignments.
And hey, if I can, Chris has been in several of our courses. If you're still there, Chris, do you feel that the use of Spark the way it is engaging? I guess so it would make you want to use that rather than ChatGPT.
Um, I would say so. I would consider myself a bit of an early adopter on tech, though. So I was excited to to use the AI assistant when it came out. Um, from a student's perspective, I would say I think a lot of the other students aren't um, aware of the interactive nature of using AI, right? So whether that's liking responses or specifically with Nectar, because it is, really more Socratic, right? It doesn't really give you an answer. Um, you have to be thoughtful about how you're asking questions or how you're moving the information forward. So when you talked earlier about, you know, active learning and making connections with stuff we already do, that's one big difference. It's you can't generate content in Nectar. So even if you have a question, you have to show some interactive interaction with the material in order to get some movement. So it's great on that. It's been great on that front. Um, so
That's cool.
that's what I would say.
And that's constructivism at its best, right? For the learning nerds in all of us.
Yeah, I think the other thing that makes somebody want to use a tool, and this is just more from an IT perspective and somebody that's expected to drive adoption on products and features, you have to meet your constituents where they're at. So if you know that you can't expect them to leave the house to go use a product and then come back. And so that's been something very deliberate in the use of Nectar within our classroom is it's right there in the class with them. There is no venture off and then come back. You're doing it in the classroom. And just that alone can help drive adoption, and because you have their attention while they're on that screen. So as long as you have their attention, you can utilize that. In this case, we're trying to drive them to, higher retention, higher
Mhm.
performance in class. And so we're going to put whatever tools that we find that's going to drive those metrics. In this case, Nectar has helped us with those. And so so that's why we kind of try to
Mhm.
keep it front and center in the students' classroom. So they're seeing it there and they're being encouraged to use it. And then meanwhile, while they're being encouraged to use this tool, if they read, our academic policy, there's a lot about not cheating, right? And there's and so as a student, you could be like, well, oh man, I'm nervous to go use ChatGPT, and I don't want to just copy and paste because, that might be considered cheating. But here's this product, this AI tool that they're actually encouraging me to use. And so I know for me as a student, that would be like an immediate relief, like oh, I feel fully empowered to use this tool versus I'm not sure what the rules are on using that tool.
Mhm.
Question for you
And
guys. What's the adoption rate like for your students? Like how many, out of all your students, what's the adoption rate like for using this tool?
do you have that, Ethan?
Can maybe grab it actually. I think LAPU has 100% workspace acceptance rate. So there's a workspace, users get an email to join the workspace. That's 100%. The actual usage. So going back to summer term 1, I forget the exact numbers. I think it was 330 out of about 2,000. No, excuse me, 330 out of like 1,400 students use the tool. I bet that's gone up. I'm gonna wager 40 to 50% usage. Does that sound about right?
That matches what we've been looking at. So we started off, and that's from lessons learned. We had to think of it from, okay, we have this amazing tool. Now we need to market it internally to our own students, right? So we had to change our mindset. Just because it was there, they weren't going to use it. To your point, Wei they weren't just going to use it because it was there. We had to kind of over-explain, over-emphasize, over-communicate that Spark was there for them to use. And we have seen it go up each term that we've used it. Yeah.
And some users have sent thousands of messages. Some courses I'm looking at right now have thousands of messages. Some have, 10, 50. So it's quite varied. But there are some power users and some just kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 low use users as
And,
well.
and it's interesting. We're going to see that go up because now we're connecting with active learning. So we're requiring interactions within the course for discussions, assignments, things like that. But what's interesting is the courses where you have faculty who are more engaged and more lean more towards the AI side of life, students use it more and they're more comfortable with it and they get better grades, even though it's not doing the work for them. So the mental mindset of the faculty has a direct impact on the students' use and grade outcome. So if you're a troglodyte, your student grades are going to be kind of low. That's all I'm saying.
And just a PSA, if your university is having trouble, if you're more in the lines with the George and I of the world of where we want this product in the hands of our students, and maybe you have that perspective, but the folks around you or maybe your policies at your university don't, we'd love to join you and be part of those conversations and illustrate how it's made a change for our students. Um, that's how much we believe in the underlying technology. So yeah.
Since we have Trinity on here, can I drop a kind of a cool thing that I learned yesterday? And it's preliminary, very preliminary. I was looking at some data that we have, and we have a couple questions on faith in our end of course survey. And so question 14 and 16 are about faith. One of them, I forget the exact nature, but one of them is about how they're connecting their faith with work and the class content that they're learning. People who use Spark have much higher scores, significantly different scores about their faith formation when it connects to work and class when they use Spark compared to those who don't. Now, question 14, I forget which one that was. I think that was just overall formation. It remained fairly close, fairly the same. It wasn't significant, but it has a much higher incidence of creating that faith formation when it comes to work and the classwork they're doing. So it's directly affecting people. So when people come up and with that question, you could say, I hear you, but that's not the truth. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of interesting. And that's preliminary data that we have.
Darren, how is it at Trinity in terms of students' use of AI? I'm curious if you're willing to share. I mean, totally understand if you can't or if you won't. But is it, yeah.
Peter's doing some weird thing.
Sorry? I'm sorry, could you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
Oh, we got you now.
You got me now. Yeah, my computer is trying to restart on me.
No.
That's like a
It's just one
nightmare.
of those, those auto updates where it's,
yeah.
and now it wants to restart right in the middle of a meeting.
Oh.
So hopefully I don't get cut out. I'm fairly new to the university, so I'm not sure how we're using AI yet. So I can't necessarily answer it. But maybe next time if I come on the meeting again, I'll have a better answer for you.
Totally fair. What about you, Logan? I know you're in the, more of the project side of things.
Well, we're both on the project side of things, me and Darren. But we're both new.
Okay.
We've both been here. I
You have
mean, I've
homework
been here
now.
about 3 months, so I can't speak to current students. Yeah. In terms
Then
of
let me ask you, I'll challenge this. Maybe Darren and Logan, you guys could answer this. Back to that question that we were asking earlier. Is there an area where you're not able to utilize AI yet in certain products or features within project management that you're like, wow, like it's there, the technology's there. I don't know why they haven't applied it to this yet.
I can speak to it, Logan, if you want. So I don't know, you guys are probably using, I don't know if the other universities are using like LAPU, if you're using Teams. So Office 365 has AI built into it,
Mhm.
but you have to enable AI, you have to enable Copilot, and that's the AI tool within Microsoft to work with it. So we have Teams and we have Office 365, but we don't have AI enabled. I worked at another university before here and we had it enabled, and I was like, wow, this is such cool features, but it's not enabled here at Trinity. So that's one thing that if we had it enabled, it would increase productivity across the institution.
Mhm.
Nice.
So Purdue, they've graduated the most astronauts of any university in the United States, right? And Louisiana is part of that group of folks who are doing that. Uh, you use Copilot, right? You were saying in the beginning, did I hear that correctly? Are you using it in the learning process as well, or how are you using it?
Actually, that those kind of a series of workshops are designed for faculties. It's not for graduate students, but they teach
Okay.
faculty how to use it, like how to design the course or syllabus or summative or formative exercise. We have one semester of kind of a training every week for faculty members. Yeah, I think that the school and also different kind of awards for faculty who use AI effectively in their classes. So yeah, it seems that it has been and there's a lot of innovation grants dedicated for AI initiatives. Yeah, we're using it widely, but for our graduate students, I think I just personally I use Chat GPT more, and a lot of my friends they even pay for get the professional pro version of Chat GPT. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about the question because it's the first time I joined this meeting. For that Nectar, any kind of a course assistant is it embedded in a synchronous course, or it's in Canvas, it's completely fully online course, right? If they can ask any questions to the teachers, to the AI assistant, and do they still have the questions for the teachers? So what the teacher's role?
Can I answer that a little bit and then hand it off to somebody? So teach at LAPU as well, right? And I literally got an email from a student this week. So the student emailed me asking me a question about the class, and I'm looking at it post 8 hours from the individual sending it, right? So 8 hours later, I'm looking at my email. She sent it late at night. I'm looking in the morning. And then the first email had a question. Then there was a second email about an hour later saying, "Oh, never mind. Spark helped me out. That was very cool." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I reached out to her, and then we were able to get into a conversation that was deeper than just, what's in the course. We were able to kind of take a little deeper dive into the content piece. So it kind of created a bridge of deeper communication than that cursory, what is this kind of stuff conversation. So it's been super cool to do that. Now that's my experience from a faculty side, but Mike, Callista, Daniel, Ethan, I'll throw it out to you for other perspectives too.
Mike, what kind of feedback have you been seeing lately in the feedback channel? I know I've looked at it a couple of times because students are able to give us direct feedback through the app, and they overwhelmingly have super positive responses to it. And to what George's point was, is like it's available at 3 a.m. when their teacher's not, which is super helpful, and it opens up that doorway for them to interact with the teacher in ways beyond questioning the syllabus and the course content.
Yeah, I haven't got a lot of recent, but at the beginning of the term, we got a lot of, I've talked with Spark for such a long time and answered a lot of the questions they had for me to answer are very supportive. Thank you. Like, so yeah. Uh, um, Spark referred a person to a great museum in Washington, DC. Um, but they told him a different one they wanted to go to, but they said, I like his choice a lot better. Yeah, so it actually suggested a specific gallery for them to attend there, which is kind of cool. Yeah, it works well. I love it, but don't trust it, which is fair. Very helpful. Great Spark helps and answers all questions. Yeah, they're just citing how available it is. All kinds of good feedback.
I think your question's totally appropriate. And the last month we kind of dove into that a little bit as to like, well, what's the role of a faculty member or a professor if software can do the same thing? And so it was a very nuanced conversation, but I remember walking away thinking, yeah, a calculator can do what people can do too, but somebody utilizing that information that's presented on the calculator is different than actually calculating and coming up with the result. And so that I know that doesn't answer your question specifically, but at LAPU, the role of the professor is still to ensure that that student is succeeding and learning. And the function of AI is only to do whatever we've asked it to do specifically, right? So it's not as nuanced, and it can't keep our students' best interest in mind at all times the same way that a human can at this time. Could I see the world where technology advances to that point? I could see a world. Yeah. I mean, we have folks that are, there's language learning products out there, really popular ones that have utilized AI for quite some time to say, wait a second, learner, we can see that you've mastered this. So you don't need to worry about, Spanish genders. We're going to actually move on to the next topic. And then some months later, it sees, oh, you're having a hard time with, associating words and genders. So let's go back to that topic. So in learning, it's there. However, for anybody on here that's multilingual, you know that those apps can only do so much in terms of teaching a language. It takes so much more than that app to really to master a language. And so I see the evolution of AI similar to that, and that yeah, it is and it will be extremely crucial. Because you got smart folks like George that are helping kind of marrying that learning process with this emerging technology. Um, but humans, we're still very flawed, and we're still very contextual in a way that technology is not quite there yet. So, but that's an IT guy's perspective. So I'm not speaking on behalf of the whole university. That's just my opinion.
Well, you know what's interesting? So in my time at the Skunk Works, the famous story that went around was on the F-117. It was the first stealth fighter, first operational stealth fighter, right? And all the computer programs and computer programming were the exact opposite of what Kelly Johnson, the primary engineer, said it should be. And so it didn't have the thought process that this kind of super out of the box thinker had because it was confined to what it knew. And it said we should build it, the way they said it should be built was smooth curved surfaces, where Kelly Johnson was saying no sharp angles. And then when they put the two on the radar to see how big the radar signature was, the one with high angles had the radar signature that was about 10 times smaller than the one that the computer generated. So there's a lot of room out there where we need to think it through, and we can't just take it on its face value, because the big events, at least in aerospace, would have never happened if we just kind of blindly followed that. So we have to still have those big generalized thinkers that kind of are contrarians to what other things are being said. And that was pretty cool, because you can see the F-117 is it looks like the reason why I want one of Elon Musk's Cybertrucks is because it reminds me of that, with all those sharp angles, right? But it had the lowest radar signature of any plane ever, which is crazy.
Cool.
Can I hop in there real fast?
Yes,
On
please.
this notion of like, do we see a world in the near future, 5-10 years, where educators get replaced? One of the things that motivates me to come in and do what I do is to make every instructor 5 or 10 or 20%, better in every way. We've all been in classrooms, we've all been instructing, as well as like the lost student in a course on a particular topic. We just can't quite grab the teacher's attention. I see all this as giving that teacher 10 or 20 or 30, TAs for every single student. And I mean, I think we should have the other perspective too. If we can give, I don't know, 1 billion students who do not have good education, a personal teacher, an AI teacher, I'll take that every day. Is not as good as a personal teacher, of course, but I'll happily give a pretty good teacher, a pretty good, third grade math teacher in the form of an AI assistant to someone who is doesn't have that opportunity. So I in no way do I wake up worried that in 20 years, we're all going to be teaching our kids with robots. That doesn't all concern me.
Doesn't concern me either. I grew up on the Jetsons, so I get excited by that stuff. So yeah. Any last minute questions or thoughts anybody wants to throw out there before we wrap up?
May I throw
Maybe
a
one
thought
thought.
out? Oh, go ahead, Ethan.
Maybe one thought on technology that I want to see that we could do is emotional analysis to influence the artificial intelligence. No one's doing this now. It's this weird, creepy, uncanny valley personal information thing, right? There's a big conversation there. But we have the ability to detect like frustration on facial expressions and anger, annoyance, and all this stuff. And that could influence the AI assistant or tutor or whatever. No one's doing that yet, to my knowledge. Maybe someone's researching it, but maybe in 5 or 10 years we can get past that in a meaningful way, and it'd be cool.
That would be awesome.
Kind of creepy, but
In real time, right? It would be taking in that information and then modifying the prompt or inputs, whatever input, in order to change the output that the person's seeing to match their emotional state. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, imagine you're reading across the output from the assistants, word 57, your face is confused. It recognizes that word 57, something that makes sense. And then, yeah, it can, in real time, support you in just the way you need, just in time. That'd be super
Yeah,
cool.
it could add some parentheses behind that word and actually put the description
Exactly.
of what it means and such.
Totally.
Ah,
Totally.
Or swap it for a
interesting.
synonym. That's a lower
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Totally. Or explain like the
Yeah.
chain rule for derivatives or
That's a
whatever.
really cool idea.
One day. One day. One day.
That would be amazing.
That'd be cool to have in like a Google Lens format too,
Mm.
wearable.
Oh my gosh.
Because you could be reading a book and it could just be like layman's terming it for you as you read it.
You could read a book in a different language. You didn't
Yeah, in a
understand.
different
Yeah,
language,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, that is thought provoking. I think that's a good place to stop because it's got us all thinking about crazy things. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to sit and have this conversation with us. We'd like to invite you next month as well. We'll be doing the same thing. If you felt like, oh, there was something in here, oh wow, I wish Sarah or Bobby would have heard this, or maybe this is the person that, you know, we can change some hearts and minds on your behalf. We'd love to do that too. Or just somebody that likes to geek out on this stuff and wants to hear, you know, we'd love to hear their opinion. So, but yeah, thank you all very much. If you're trying to find the next date, just go, it's on the aicenter.lapu.edu. So if you go to aicenter.lapu.edu and you scroll down, you can see some of the events that we're having and feel free to sign up for those there. But thank you all so much. Appreciate your time and energy today.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Daniel. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
All right. See y'all later.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye.